In 1919, a 25-year-old Japanese naval officer named Isoroku Yamamoto arrived at Harvard University, immersing himself in the culture of a nation he would one day fight against. For 2 years, he walked the streets of Boston, absorbed the language, and studied American democracy and society. He frequented jazz clubs in Georgia, played poker with American officers despite being terrible at it, and engaged in spirited debates over whiskey and politics. He marveled at the bustling cities of New York, Pittsburgh, and Detroit, witnessing the scale of American industry firsthand. Factories churned out cars, ships, and planes with an efficiency and speed that few could imagine. Every visit, every observation reinforced a reality. America was a nation of relentless production, capable of sustaining itself and rebuilding even after devastating losses. Unlike many of his contemporaries in the Japanese military, Yamamoto recognized the immensity of the American machine and understood the dangers of underestimating it. He reported his observations back to Tokyo, emphasizing that any war with the United States would be extraordinarily difficult. This period of cultural immersion shaped him not only as a naval officer but as a strategist who could see beyond the immediate ambitions of his homeland. He loved the United States and its complexity, admired its people, and yet knew that one day, duty would force him into direct conflict with a country he had come to understand intimately. His foresight and realism, combined with a deep appreciation for American culture, set him apart as one of the few leaders in Japan who fully grasped the consequences of war with a modern industrial power. By 1940, Yamamoto had risen to admiral, commanding the Imperial Japanese Navy's combined fleet, the most powerful naval force in the Pacific. Yet his awareness of the United States might never left him. Japan faced a crippling shortage of oil and raw materials. 4 years of brutal campaigns in China had drained the nation, and embargoes from the United States left its military and economy dangerously under-resourced. The Japanese High Command and Emperor Hirohito demanded bold action. They urged Yamamoto to strike America preemptively, believing that a swift, decisive blow could secure resources in Southeast Asia before the U.S. could react. Yamamoto knew this was a perilous gamble. In his reports, he warned that attacking the United States would awaken a sleeping giant and that Japan could only run wild for 6 months before facing inevitable defeat. Despite his personal misgivings, he was bound by duty. He agreed to plan the attack, but his foresight remained. The strategy was dangerously optimistic, and the consequences could be catastrophic. The tension weighed heavily on him. He was a man torn between loyalty, duty, and the reality he had observed so clearly during his years in America. His strategic genius lay not in blind obedience but in anticipating the consequences of every move, understanding the enormous industrial and military potential of his adversary. This internal conflict, combined with the pressures from Japan's leaders, set the stage for one of the most consequential decisions in history. By 1941, Yamamoto had become the central figure in Japan's Pacific strategy. The Imperial Japanese Navy faced a critical dilemma: secure oil and resources from Southeast Asia without allowing the United States time to react. His solution was audacious yet risky: an airstrike against the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. He personally oversaw the planning, assigning Commander Minoru Genda to meticulously study the harbor, the ships, and defensive positions. Yamamoto knew that conventional torpedoes would fail in the shallow waters, so Genda modified and tested new designs, ensuring that the attack could succeed. The plan involved 2 waves. The first to target battleships and airfields, the second to finish what the first missed. It was a tactical masterpiece in planning, designed to paralyze the U.S. fleet long enough for Japan to seize territory in Southeast Asia. Yet Yamamoto remained deeply uneasy. He understood the magnitude of awakening a sleeping giant. The strike could buy 6 months of strategic advantage, but after that, America's industrial power would overwhelm Japan. Despite his personal doubts, he executed the plan with precision. On December 7, 1941, 353 Japanese aircraft launched in 2 waves, catching the U.S. forces completely off guard. By 7:48 a.m., the first bombs fell, striking airfields and battleships. The element of surprise was total, and in mere minutes, the Pacific Fleet suffered catastrophic losses. Thousands of lives were lost in an instant, ships were destroyed or crippled, and the attack achieved its tactical goals. Yet the seeds of Japan's eventual defeat were already sown. The industrial might and resilience of the United States would ultimately turn the tide, a fact Yamamoto had foreseen but could not prevent. At 6 a.m. on December 7, 1941, 6 Japanese aircraft carriers launched 353 aircraft toward Oahu, Hawaii. The first wave, led by Mitsuo Fukita, was precise and swift. Radar stations detected the incoming planes at 7:02 a.m., but initial reports were dismissed as a misidentification, leaving American forces unprepared. By 7:48 a.m., dive bombers struck Hickam Field, Wheeler Field, and Ford Island. Explosions ripped through hangars and battleships, throwing men into the air and engulfing ships in flames. Torpedo bombers followed, targeting battleships with deadly precision. Within 12 minutes, hundreds of American servicemen were killed or trapped, and key naval vessels were severely damaged or sunk. Amidst the chaos, acts of bravery unfolded. Medics treated the wounded under fire, soldiers attempted to defend the installations, and survivors fought to save lives amid crumbling infrastructure. The second wave continued the devastation, targeting airfields and remaining ships, aiming to cripple the Pacific Fleet's capacity to respond. Yet, crucially, 3 aircraft carriers were absent that day, unknowingly sparing America from total annihilation. Yamamoto's carefully orchestrated strike achieved tactical success, but it failed strategically. The sleeping giant he had feared would awaken stronger than ever. The skies over Pearl Harbor burned with fire and smoke, the echoes of battle signaling both immediate triumph and looming consequences. In the aftermath, Pearl Harbor lay in ruins. Over 2,400 Americans were dead, including sailors, soldiers, and civilians. Nearly 200 aircraft were destroyed, and 8 battleships were severely damaged or sunk. The attack sent shockwaves across the United States, turning isolationist sentiment into full-scale mobilization. President Roosevelt addressed Congress on December 8, declaring December 7 a date which will live in infamy, and Congress voted overwhelmingly for war. Germany and Italy soon declared war on America, expanding the conflict globally. Yamamoto, aware of his partial success, knew the strike had only delayed the inevitable. America's industrial might would rebuild what was lost and more. Yet, for the men on the ground and in the air, the horror of the attack was immediate and tangible. Hospitals overflowed with the wounded, families mourned the fallen, and the Pacific Theater became the central stage of an escalating war. Yamamoto's genius was unquestionable. He had achieved the tactical surprise of a lifetime, but the strategic gamble was profound. The decision to strike Pearl Harbor, while momentarily advantageous, awakened a power that would soon define the course of the war. Yamamoto's foresight proved tragically accurate. 6 months later, at the Battle of Midway, Japan suffered devastating losses. Yamamoto's prediction that America could rebuild and retaliate came true. His strategic brilliance was overshadowed by the limitations of his nation's resources and the resilience of his enemy. In April 1943, U.S. intelligence intercepted Yamamoto's flight plans over Bougainville, and a squadron of P-38 Lightning fighters was dispatched to intercept him. Flying low over the ocean to avoid detection, American pilots engaged Yamamoto's escort, eventually shooting down his plane. Yamamoto was killed instantly, bringing a dramatic and symbolic end to the man who had orchestrated one of the most famous attacks in history. His death marked a pivotal point. Japan lost not only a brilliant strategist but also a symbol of the calculated risk that had initiated the Pacific War. The irony is profound. The man who loved and studied America, who had foreseen its industrial might, and who had warned against the war, died because of the very conflict he had reluctantly unleashed. His legacy is a mixture of brilliance, foresight, and tragic inevitability, leaving historians to wonder how differently history might have unfolded had his advice been heeded.